Hey guys, back again now with another episode. I lost the last audio on the last episode because of OBS messing up, and basically it went really high pitched and really just unusable. So I'm going to cover some of the things I've changed. It was more of a refinement session than major decisions. But yeah, it's getting there. The track is nearly pretty much done now, in the sense of like there's still a lot to do, but it's kind of like the less things change. It's more about tweaks and making little moments now that really start to pull things together and, you know, make something like, come on, you know? So let's oh, I haven't even started OBS, so give me 2 secs. Let's have a listen to the breakdown from halfway through.
21st century. Fire. Biotech, nanotech. Fire. Fusion and fission. Fire. And that is just the first decade. Fire. We are now 3 months into the year of our Lord. We can create cybernetic individuals. Fire. We'll be completely indistinguishable from us. Fire. Which leads to an obvious conclusion. We are the gods now.
That sounded really good, really thick. One thing I did notice is maybe the snare could be a bit louder.
Fire. We are now 3 months into the year of our Lord. We can create cybernetic individuals. Be completely indistinguishable from us. Which leads be completely indistinguishable from us. Which leads to an obvious conclusion.
I also sent this to my wife, and she's good at giving feedback because she's not technical, so she gives very non-technical feedback, which is kind of what you want. Like, if I send this to another producer, he's going to tell me how he would have produced the song rather than what may be best for the song, because feedback should be given in light of the producer that's doing it. If you ask me for feedback, I should technically give feedback that makes sense to you rather than like, oh, I would have done it this way. But the only feedback I can give is I would have done it this way, you know? It's difficult. But because my wife, she isn't a producer, she will just be like, that sounds boring, that sounds good, there's too many words here, it's a bit confusing. So one thing she did say was that the breakdown here, which is lots of vocals,
4000 BC, the wheel,
too complicated, ruins the flow of the track. And I was a bit, okay, take that on board. It doesn't mean I have to listen to it, but I'll take it on board. I do agree with it somewhat. So what I may do is actually create an intro track with this and basically turn this section here into a long synth intro that I can play at the start of my set, and then it drops in on I don't know, by here or something. Yeah, and I also had feedback off Bermeo. I have a penchant for sending tracks before they're ready. The things add in too quickly by here. So if you listen to this section right now, that's fine. And then which is mental, really, that I didn't, you know, the track wasn't ready to send to people. It's just something that I do. I send things to people, and then we see how things go, really. But if you listen to this, there's just too much in at one point. So you go from now, if you imagine, I've added in this, the vocal, this, the Hoover, and this. It's way too much. So what I would do is just go here, loop this, probably duplicate that twice, and then what we've got here now is an extra section where we can bring it back into where it would have been landing. So we're talking about there again, and now here just could put another locator there just to make things more easy to see. So let's go from here now. So what I would want to do is bring in something there that kind of brings more the vibe. So that sounds weird, doesn't it? What is going on there? There's something arise there. What is going on? There's that looks exactly the same though, doesn't it? If I superimpose this, is there any difference? No. Oh, hang on, I see. Bloody hell, how did I miss that? That's not offbeat. There we go. Bloody hell. No way. Oh no.
Fire.
Well, I'm going to have to go round and change all of this now. Apologies. Shit. It's not good. Just going to colour this something else so I know where I've been and where I haven't been. Hopefully this mic is doing good. Some Elden Ring posts. Finished the game now. The DLC is good, but difficult. Yeah, a bit too difficult to be honest. For me personally, it was just felt artificial. If anyone's played it, but so really there shouldn't be anything there, not here.
Fire.
So what we'll do here is we do this. Maybe we can. No, we'll have to do that. And now grab all of this, and then we'll colour this a different colour now to signify that this has changed. And now cool. So that is pretty much what we need to do, and we need to go out and replace every replace all the like this. Annoying that this happened, to be honest. have to add in these extra fills and stuff in. Cool. Just got to double check that I'm not doing anything I shouldn't be changing, you know? Change that to a different color again, and then grab that. You know, once the dust has settled on this issue, you can kind of change things back to the same color, but there's no real need, is there? So what drum pattern have we got there? Just a normal one, but that seems fine actually. So I'll probably, maybe should we offset these by here so we have the... I'm going to just put a compressor on that to kind of... Yeah, trying to put a, if you're going to do a filter and EQ, I would put yeah, your compressor before it, obviously. So I'm going to make this a little bit more interesting. I find them quite boring sometimes when it's just like, you know. So what we do, and then just add in another effect. I like to add a redux in, but I'm starting to get tired of that sound now. It's kind of just doesn't sound good a lot of the time. So let's do it. Yeah, that sounds pretty cool, to be honest. You just got to level match it afterwards. Just got to be careful with that. So I'll just map that to macro 1, map this to nothing, copy this, grab that, show automation, put that there. Sorry, just in case that wasn't clear, I'm mapping both of these to the macro so that I can edit them both at the same time, basically. So, if I do this now, they both go up. Rather than, I still want to obviously cut the lows, but obviously if I didn't cut the lows here, it does affect the redux. So it's just a bit of a more careful way to do things. So you can easily check if this is going to be the same level kind of audibly, but look at the limiter here. Going a bit wild. Only touching it a bit there. So if we just remove it, let's put 3 dB, just see. That there is probably just a transient that's kind of triggering that a little bit. So if you just put a clipper right on the end of all of this, yeah, see, crazy. What is causing that? So I'm just going to add that on the one hit just to make it a bit more unique, you know? You want to pop that like that. If we duplicate this, then we'll have... Sounded weird then. What was that? See, I like that. That's something I added in yesterday, but I'm not too fond of it anymore. So basically, one of these sections doesn't need to be here, so we're going to cut it. So I'm just going to listen to them, and then we're going to figure out which one doesn't need to survive the cut. The more you can cut, the better, you know? Because right now the track is 6 minutes, 20 seconds long. You know, if we can cut that, we're saving 15 seconds of track. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but in reality, like, if this section sounds amazing and that section sounds all right, just get rid of it. Because by comparison, you're making the track a little bit better because you're getting rid of sections that are not good enough, you know? As long as it doesn't destroy the story of the track, which is another thing entirely. But probably this one.
Our first true piece of technology. Fire. We are gods now. Our first true piece of technology.
So I think I'll just loop this section now.
Our first true piece of technology. Fire. First true piece of technology. Fire.
So we can do a little dance here maybe of these two synths against each other. So if we just do this, Control do that, and then same here but the opposite, and we can have this little battle going on between the synths just to add a little bit more movement to the track.
Our first true piece of technology.
But we're going to change this one to be a little bit higher. Just going to use a random preset just to get a bit more flavor and then change it to what we want. Loud, isn't it? Here we go. I just want a pad really, but it sounds a bit more of a lead than a pad. Come on, where are you, mate? Let's see. There we go.
Our first true piece of technology. Fire.
just make this a bit more open in the low end, and then just get away with it.
Our first true piece of technology, fire. Our first true piece of technology, fire. Our first true piece. Our first true piece of technology, fire. Our first true piece. Our first true piece. Our first true piece of tech. Our first true piece of technology. Our first true piece. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Our first true.
Problem is, there's a lot going on at the moment now, so.
Our first true piece of technology. Fire.
Bit more presence on here. That's just not loud enough to compete.
Our first true piece of technology.
Don't need so much low end in that. Oh fuck yeah.
First true piece. Our first true piece of technology. Fire.
Gonna make the release on this shorter, so we got a bit more pluck. It's a cool sound, that.
Piece of technology. Piece of technology. Fire. $100,000 BC. Stone.
That doesn't suit there anymore.
100,000 BC. Stone tools. 100,000 BC. 100,000 BC. Stone tools. 4,000 BC. The wheel. 9th century AD. Gunpowder. 19th century, Eureka, the light bulb! piece of technology. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. 100,000 BC, stone tools. 4,000 BC, the wheel. 9th century AD, gunpowder. 19th century, Eureka, the light bulb. 20th century, the automobile. Television, nuclear weapons. Spacecraft, internet. Fire. 21st century. Fire. Biotech, nanotech. Fire. Fusion and fission. Fire. And that was just the first decade. Fire. We are now 3 months.
So I'm going to add in a high-end like pad synth in this section here to maybe use that to fill in over here, just because I think maybe there's some space for it in this part of the mix, which means that if I add it in there, it kind of makes more sense. So I'm just gonna add in. Try and get something from this pack. I love this pack. So much good in it.
First century. Fire. Biotech, nanotech. Fire. 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 21st century. Fire. Biotech, nanotech. Fire. Fusion and fission. Fire. And that was just the first decade. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. 100,000 beats. BC, stone tools. 4,000 BC, the wheel. 9th century AD, gunpowder. 19th century, Eureka, the light bulb. 20th century, the automobile. Television, nuclear weapons. spacecraft, internet, fire. Fire. 21st century. Fire. 21st century. Biotech, 100,000 BC, stone tools.
Not really what I'm looking for. 2 seconds. Gets really hot in this studio with all the lights. Right.
100,000 BC.
So what we're going to do is going to save this now because it's pretty much getting there. Arrangement 1. I'm going to then resave it as arrangement 2. So we can come back to arrangement 1, and then we're going to work backwards from the drop.
Which leads to an obvious conclusion. We are the gods now.
But if I listen to my wife and we just turn all these off for now, and then use maybe this loop.
Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Which leads to an obvious conclusion. We. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Which leads to an obvious conclusion. Piece of technology. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. We. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Our first piece of technology. True piece of technology. First true piece of technology. True piece of tech. First true piece of technology. True piece of technology. Fire. We. Our first true piece of technology. We.
And once you've created the question, eventually.
19th century. Feel. Tech. Fusion. Now 3 months into the year of our Lord. This moment now. Which leads to an obvious conclusion. We.
How do you feel?
Alive.
What is your name?
David,
I am your father. You are my creation.
if you created me, who created you?
Where do it come from? The question of the ages.
That's a bit better.
Which I hope you and I will answer.
So we can kind of do, where do we come from? Our first true piece of technology. And then just like have a dance between these elements. Duplicate this, but select end, then delete, and then you want to select home and delete, and then we got it all.
I will not.
Chuck it in here. So
Our first true piece of technology. Fire.
Where do it come from?
Fire.
Where do it come from? Where do it come from?
Our first true piece of technology. Fire.
Where do it come from?
Our first true piece of technology. Fire.
and basically kind of have this little conversation. We'll see if this sounds a little better or worse. It's still around the same idea of like too many vocals, maybe.
Where do it come from? The question of the ages.
So we use that.
Which I hope you and I will answer one day.
Who created you? If you created me, who created you?
Where do it come from? The question of the ages.
But
Where do it come from? Where do it come from? Where do it come from? Where do it come from?
Our first true piece of technology.
The question of the ages,
Back up we go.
which I hope you and I will answer. The question of the ages.
Our first true piece of technology. Fire.
The question of the ages. The question of the ages.
Our first true piece of technology. Fire.
Where do it come from?
Our first true piece of technology. Fire.
Given the nature of this track with the, fire, I think it'll be cool if we had some thunderstorm sounds in this track. That'd be quite interesting, but obviously a logical thing as well, because this could be like a sophisticated primate basically asking his friend like fire, whatever. I'm just talking a bit of pish now, but let's see if we can get something on Splice really quick. Thunder. Let's have a listen. That's cool. Rain as well. That's cool as well. Mate, imagine you hear this in a rave with all the thunder and all. Okay, and now we just want a rain background just to fill in. Cool. That's a minute as well, so that'll give us plenty of stuff. So we're going to create a new group for this. Name it Foley. I go white. Sorry, it's meant to be a group. And we're going to stick all these download files in here. Sorry. There we go. So we got the background rain. And that's all we need from that. And that's just loud enough to give it some personality, and then cut it there. The importance of this won't be to overdo it. So if we grab all our thunders and check which was the best one. That can be on the thing. We get rid of this church bell. Sounds shit now.
Conclusion. Our first true people. Our first fire.
That's a cool one. Now, I think we have a brighter one to start off, which is this one. I mean, like that. Just going to add a little shift to that to make it more interesting as the thing goes on. Put the frequency fine, and then we're just going to
Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Fire.
The question of the ages.
Our first true piece of technology. Fire.
Where do it come from?
Our first true piece. Our first true piece of technology. Which leads to an obvious conclusion. We are the gods now.
not convinced, but
Fire. Our first true piece of technology. True piece of technology. True piece of tech. Our first true piece of technology. Fire.
The question of the ages.
Our first true piece of technology. Fire.
Where do it come from?
Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Which leads to an obvious conclusion. We are the gods now. 21st century. Biotech, nanotech, fusion and fission. Our first.
this is becoming, it's quite challenging because there's no lead melody in this track, really. There's no like, it's just a groove that's really good, you know, this.
Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Our first.
So maybe we do bring these, where are they? This.
Our first. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Our first true piece of technology. 21st century. Biotech, nanotech, fusion and fission. And that is just the first decade. We are now 3 months into the year of our Lord. We can create cybernetic
Just going to try adding in just a tension up, you know, just a lead that kind of just goes up a little bit, you know.
Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Fire.
That's okay, but it's a bit, simplistic. And we're no simps here, are we? No simps. Disgrace.
Our first true piece of technology. Our first true piece of technology. Fire.
So, I think this is where we're going to go with this.
Our first. Our first true piece of Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Fire.
So, we're nearly there with the notes on this. It's not quite what I want, but...
Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Our first true. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Fire.
And we start again there, is it? Is that what we're doing?
Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Fire.
This is cool. This is a nice little riff we got going. But why is it starting there? I hate it when it does.
Our first true piece. Our first true piece of technology.
There we go. And then what you can do, you do mix there. And then but what we're going to do here, we're going to remove a lot of the other things so it kind of breathes a bit more. But we're going to also add a raw, because we need it to sound ballsy as it is on its own, you know? But
first. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. 21st century. Biotech. 21st century. Biotech, nanotech, fusion and fission. And that was just the first decade. 21st.
So we can't have it any further than that really, because you need the space there for the rest of the track. So what we're going to do, we're going to add a reverb into this. And we're going to add a freeze. Add that on top of that. And then pretty much send that to the moon.
21st century. Biotech, nanotech, fusion and fission. And that was just the first decade. We are now 3 months into the year of our Lord. We can create cybernetic individuals. We're completely indistinguishable. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Fire. Our first true piece of technology.
Oh yeah, a little tip if you want to do that, control and drag, and it works on all of the, apart from that one, it works on the ups and downs as well. It's pretty cool.
True piece of technology. Our first true piece of technology. Fire, fire.
Could play with either of that.
Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. 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 Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. 21st century. 21st century. 21st century. Biotech, nanotech, fusion and fission. And that was just the first decade. We are now 3 months into the year of our Lord. We can create cybernetic individuals. They'll be completely indistinguishable from us. Which leads to an obvious conclusion. We are the gods.
Needs a little bit more space there, I think. It's like
Which leads to an obvious conclusion. We are the god.
Maybe it needs to get rid of that.
Which leads to an obvious conclusion.
That needs a bit more break as well.
Which leads to an obvious conclusion. We are the gods now. We are the gods now. We are the gods now. Which leads to an obvious conclusion. We are the gods now.
Yeah, pretty much. That's cool.
Fire. 21st century. True piece of technology. Which leads to an obvious conclusion. We true piece of technology.
There's a bit hidden.
Our first true piece of technology. Fire. We the gods now. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. Fire. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. We the gods now. Our first true piece of technology. Fire. We the gods now. Fire. Fire. Fire.
Well, there we go. I think that's pretty much, once again, nearly there. This will be a case of like listening now to this over the next couple hours, maybe day, and then work out whether this needs to go somewhere or, yeah. If I'm happy with it, I'll send it to a label, see what they say about it, and then go from there. I'm not, I'm not 100% on the track. I like it. It's something I would play outside. It's quite cool, but it's difficult to say when you're in the mix of it whether it's a good track or not. So let me know your thoughts if you've enjoyed this, or if there's any feedback you'd like to give. How's the audio situation doing? If you want me to concentrate on certain things or not, just let me know. And yeah, catch you next time.